There's something going on beneath the water. People getting hot and making sons and daughters. It's just you and me and LUV and the TUB.
Hello there, Surfer17 once again, introducing you to answering the questions that people have been sending me over the last few days. So, as I mentioned, I would do this if I got enough questions. I've had a bunch of questions, thankfully, so it looks like it's going ahead. And originally, I was going to say who these questions were from, but I don't know, I think maybe to keep those people anonymous might make this a little better, because I don't want any backlashes going anywhere, even though all of these questions are pretty good. There's none that are like, my penis is only 2 inches long, and I wish it was bigger. What do I do? There's nothing silly like that, luckily enough. So I'm just going to go through the list of them. I'm not going to be picking them in any relative order. It's literally going to be the order I received them. And I'll just read the question out and I'll answer it. It's as simple as that. It's a basic premise. So the first one I got was, what advice would you give to someone in high school on how to survive? And that is a pretty interesting question because, well, the first thing is the cultural difference in this question. High school, we don't have high schools in England. Or we don't call them high schools, we call them secondary schools, because they're the second school that you enter. And I assume that this is that school, because for me, the English schooling age is very different to the American ones. We have two completely different ways of doing it. And the ones that we do is, we start nursery when we're very young. When you're about, 3 or 4 or something stupid like that. And then I think when you get to, no, I think it's even before that, sorry, nursery. And then when you get to 4, you start baby school, which is your primary school, what we call it, and you leave primary school from starting at age 4, you leave at around age 10 or 11. Then you go into secondary school, which is, I assume, is the high school of your guys, because I know you all go a little bit later, because you finish a lot later than we do. But we do secondary school from being 11 to being about 15, 16. That's when we leave, that's when we can go to college, or we can get a job, or we can, sit on arse, do nothing, and become a dredge on society. That's how our schooling works. Yours is a little different to my knowledge of it, and I'm not completely up on the schooling system in America, but I do know that you finish much later. I think your guys finish when you're about 18, because you start a couple of years later. But it's the same thing everywhere. It's the same universal answer that you can give for anything. And how to survive in school is pretty easy, really. It's all the simple things that you've been taught in your life, that your parents have drilled into you. Everything is the main thing is, don't be a dick. Nobody likes dicks. It's just how it works. If you're that guy who everybody knows because he's a douchebag, no one's gonna like you, no one's gonna be around you, and you're just not gonna have a good time. It's one of those things where I say don't be a dick, and I say it in reference to, if somebody comes up to you and they start pushing you around and they start trying to beat you up or trying to put you in a bad situation, you want to stop that, obviously. I would never say, intentionally be a pussy over anything, but it's a case of, I got very good advice when I was at school by my dad, and he told me never start a fight, but finish it. And that expression is literally, you should never go looking for trouble in those kind of situations, but if trouble finds you and you can't talk your way out of it, you've got to be prepared to handle yourself, and that's exactly what you should do. And that is one of the main ways to survive high school, to survive secondary school. I didn't actually have a single fight in my secondary school entire time. I had a lot of times when I squared up with people, I had a lot of times when it looked like it were going that way, but it never did, and it was all because I pretty much abided by that. Another key to surviving it, which is not as key to the whole economy that starts there, because it's like an ecosystem of school, because you have the big fish, you have the guys that are popular, the guys that are taller than you physically, that are stronger than you physically, then you have the ones that are smarter than you, then you have the ones below you, then you have the whole girl dynamic where your hormones are crazy and all that kind of madness. It's a crazy time, it really is, and I'm not exactly the oldest person in the world, so looking back on this is kind of funny in a sense, because it wasn't so long ago that I was at school myself. But the one thing I would say more than anything is, if you're interested in something at school, try and take it as far as you can. And one attitude that I had, which shot me in the foot and I regret pretty much every day of my life, is when we were being taught something, I looked at it as if from one perspective, a very cynical perspective of when will I ever need this in real life? And if anything that I was being taught came up and that question arose, I would just ignore it. I would just fuck about and piss around, and I wouldn't take it on board. And there are a lot of things that would definitely help me in my life today if I'd have paid more attention to them, because when I was at school I was much more focused on making my friends laugh and having a good time than I was on pushing my studies, and a lot of areas of my schooling suffered because of this. And that's something you want to avoid. So to answer the question, how do you survive, don't be a dick, stick up for yourself if anybody starts shit and you can't talk your way out of it. Don't kill yourself over girls, because that shit's just fucking stupid. And don't leave school with regrets. If there's someone you've always liked and you wanted to ask them out but you never did, go up to them and ask them out tomorrow. Go up to them and kiss them and see if they respond. If it's a slap in the face, you can tell your friends next day and have a really good time. If she kisses you back, you've got a girlfriend. It's like, never ever leave that environment so that in 10 years you can get bitter and I should have done this, I should have done that, because it's never it's not a healthy section of your life. It's not what you want. But that should answer that question, hopefully. So, question 2. How do you decide what games to make a video walkthrough for? So this one's a little bit more on topic, which is always good, and this is an easy question to answer. The guides I make are for the games I'm personally interested in. How it generally works is the new games that come out, if I think they're going to be popular, and if I think people are going to want to watch it, going to need it, or just going to be interested in it, I'm going to make a guide for it. And it all stems off that one thing. If I'm interested, I'll do it. If I can't play it, I can't make a guide, because it's that simple. And there are games I will play that I don't like if I can physically play them, because I know they'll get views. I've done that with a few guides on my channel. And the only other one that stands out is if I know people are going to struggle with it. So if I know it's going to be a tough game and it's going to kick people's ass, I'll probably make an exception to go near that to make a guide, because you make stuff for games like, like Enslaved, like Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2, and my nephews wouldn't struggle with those games on the hardest difficulty because they're not that challenging if you play them correctly, so they don't get many views. But then you look at things like Gears of War 3's Last Boss, where the thing is an absolute clusterfuck of luck and bullshit, and it gets a lot of views because of that fact, and that's how it works. And you've kind of got to look at it from that almost workplace mentality, because if you don't, you'll probably not end up making anything. But that's how I choose them anyhow. Thank you for your question. And question 3 anyhow. What's your girlfriend's name? And post a picture of her. And do a commentary with her. Thanks. P.S. I love you. P.S.S.I. I have been sub to you for ages since Bulletstorm. First thing I'm saying to this dude, there's no way I'm posting a picture of my girlfriend. No disrespect to you, no disrespect to her. That's not something I'm going to be willing to do, because it's just not how I roll. She's called Danielle. And she's awesome, and I love her, and I'm not posting a picture, so fuck you. I will be doing a commentary with her because she wants to do it. When I get my Blue Snowball mic or something of that nature, when I can get the money to buy it, I will definitely be doing commentaries with her, because she's a very smart and funny girl, and she's a nice personality to have on my channel. Secondly, thank you very much for being subbing to me since Bulletstorm. That was probably about the 4th or 5th guide I made, so that's back in February, and it's a pretty damn long time, so thank you, man. Question 4. How long have you been with your girlfriend? That's an easy one. We've been together for 5 years now, and it's going fantastically. She is the best person I've ever met, and she compliments every single thing about me and makes me a better person, and you can't really say much more than that. Question 5. Are you Scottish, Irish, or British? Okay, now this one's a weird one, a pretty interesting one. So here's a little geography lesson for those that don't know this, and there will be some that don't, because it's just one of them things. But Scottish, Irish, and British is probably not the best way to frame this question, dude. And the reason for this is a Scotsman, an Irishman, and an Englishman are all British. They all come from the British Isles, they all come from the UK. And asking me if I'm British is just like asking a Mexican if he's American, because it's the same kind of area. And a good way of examining this and rephrasing the question would be to say, using South America as a good individual here, are you Brazilian, are you Peruvian, or are you South American, when they're all in South America? And that's kind of what that question is. So, to answer it, I'm English, dude. I come from England. I'm very proud of that fact. I never call myself British, even though I am, and the main reason for that is you can ask a Welshman, a Scottishman, and an Irishman if they're British, and they can say yes. You can't ask them if they're an Englishman because they're not an Englishman, and I take a lot of pride in where I come from. It's just how it is. So I am from England, and that is in Britain, and I hope that answers that for you. And doesn't sound too douchey, because it kind of sounds douchey. And now we're on to some slightly longer questions here, which is kind of cool. And it's, if you were being sent to a desert island populated by you, a working Xbox 360, and some rampant bananas, what would you take with you and why? So, there is a lot of things I can take here, that's the biggest problem with this, but what I'm going to approach it with, I'm going to approach it from a gaming perspective, because that makes more sense. Because if I could take anything, I would take, like, all the solar panels on the planet. I would have a massive compound that I would take with me. I would use the solar panels to power aforementioned, compound, and then I'd have every single amenity that I've got here. I'd have awesome TV, I'd have awesome internet, I'd have awesome things, and it'd all run off the same generator. Although I probably wouldn't. Internet could be difficult, could be real difficult. But you never know. I could, if I had in this imaginary future or in this imaginary situation, I could be the richest man on the planet and pay somebody to give me my own satellite. So, I could have everything if I worked it right. So, I'm going to do it from a gaming perspective. What game would I take? And that's an interesting question because I've played a hell of a lot of games and very few really keep me coming back. But I would probably go with something along the lines of a Star Ocean. Something like that. Maybe the most recent one, Till the End of Time. It is by no means a great game, but there is so much to do in that game, and it will take so goddamn long that you'll be there for millions of hours. And the combat in it's fantastic, the crafting in it's fantastic, and it's super fun, aside from the horrible voice acting, the garbage characters, the ridiculous story, and the just insidious cutscenes. So that is what I would take. Thank God for a working Xbox 360, because that would make it completely fucked. But good question, bro. And question 7 we've got here is, what is your opinion of gaming nostalgia for some of the popular old games versus the games of today, as well as the continuing level of quality of those IPs? Now this is a pretty intelligent question, well asked. And it's a good question as well because nostalgia is massive, and nostalgia for me is even bigger because I can think back to certain moments of certain games and I will get goosebumps on my back because they remind me of that moment of my life and how it felt to do what I was doing. And a couple of ones that stand out to me, like the first time you entered the Temple of Time on Ocarina of Time back in 1997 or whenever it was, and you took the Master Sword out and you became Adult Link, and it's like, that is one of the most groundbreaking, amazing moments of my gaming career at all, and it's amazing. And nostalgia is a fascinating thing because it will make you look at things with rose-tinted lenses. It'll also make you put up with things you would never put up from a completely different IP just because it's something that you used to like or something that you look back on and say, this is brilliant. And it's fascinating, it's amazing, but it's very flawed. And nostalgia can be a bad thing as well, because the amount of times I've stuck up for games that I thought were amazing back when I played them, to go back and play them, and then you kind of realise, this sucks ass. This is not as good as I thought it was. I've just, I've remembered it with my own little flourish, and it was much better in my memory than it was when I actually played it. I was just at a different place in maturity. And that is the biggest criticism with this, because the new games that are coming out are better, are more advanced, more technical, and more fulfilling than any game we have ever had. And that is just a fact. You can disagree all you want, it's a fact. Technically, they are better in every conceivable way. Creatively, maybe they don't quite have that, that passion or that heart that some of the older games that people are really attached to do. But at the same time, there are some people that probably don't think those older games are any good and hated them and thus like different ones. And it's just all down to the fact that everybody has a different opinion. And that is why games these days are so different and so structured in the way that they are. One thing that does suck, which is the level of quality of the IPs that are coming out now, is there are certain games that are trend-setting, like your Call of Duties, like your Gears of Wars, like your Halos, like all that kind of stuff, and they are redefining what it means to be, a AAA title these days, and they're setting guidelines that everybody has to hit. And the biggest casualty in this situation is the people that don't have the money to do it. The people that have got good ideas, have got good games, but they feel obliged to put in these extra things that are unnecessary that their team might not be quite as gifted at, that ultimately bring their game down. Look at Dead Space. They put a multiplayer in it because everything today has to have a multiplayer. Look at Bioshock. They put a multiplayer in it because everything today has to have a bloody multiplayer. Look at Mass Effect 3. I don't want anything other than a campaign in Mass Effect. I couldn't give a shit. I would still pay whatever they ask for to play through another Mass Effect campaign because it is so engrossing and such a rewarding game. It is a fantastic universe. You don't have to sell me on 4-player co-op. You don't have to sell me on competitive multiplayer. But we live in an age now where that is the only thing that these developers are looking at. And just look at things like the online passes. Online passes exist because people aren't interested in games for longer than a few days. They're not interested in them for any time long enough to send them back and get more money for them and buy something else. So the developers are prioritizing keeping people's attention through, addictive properties like looking into the psychology of what gets a gamer addicted to something or what gets a gamer coming back and wanting to do something, instead of the creative process of that game. Because it could get to the point where we are playing literally something that is a piece of shit, but because it's tickling the part of our brains that, gets us off for picking stuff up like loot or for leveling up and seeing those lovely noises and those visual cues, that we don't realise we're playing bad games. And that is my biggest fear, especially when you've got things like MMORPGs and MMO any fucking thing these days, and microtransactions and all these evil terms that to me don't signify gaming at all. They signify a subculture of just fucking thievery. And it's an interesting climate that we live in. Right then, so the next question is, what's the easiest and hardest game you've ever played / completed on Xbox 360? This one's an interesting one. I've played over 250 games on my Xbox, so that is a basis of quite the pool to pick from. The hardest game I've ever played is... probably Dead or Alive 4. And I know a lot of people probably weren't expecting me to say that, but if you've played it, you'll know exactly what I mean. And I'm a massive fan of the Dead or Alive series, or I used to be back on the PS2 when I first played Dead or Alive 2 and fell in love. And I used to play that game on its hardest difficulty with my friend. We used to do the tag battles and we used to kick some ass. We were really good at countering. We had it down. We used to have some, like 5-round fights against the toughest characters and just have a really, really good time. And I bought Dead or Alive 4 without even thinking about it on the Xbox, and they ruined it. To some people that like fighting games, they probably love it because of this fact, but they made even easy harder than the hardest difficulty on the last game. They made that every single character could kill you very easily if they wanted to at any given time, regardless of difficulty. And it was unbelievable. And to make it even worse, the final boss was this green bitch that just she had twice as much life as you. She did twice as much damage as you. She was buffed unbelievably. She was just an absolute bullshit character. And I think I might be wrong here because this was one of the first games I got for my Xbox, and it's been a while. But I think she could do every move on the game off of every other character. So she could hit you with everyone's fancy moves. And this is a person that if you got caught in a juggle, you were dead. And then combine that with the fact that this game took forever to load. It was just an atrocious time that I got as much achievement points out of it as I could, and then I sold it because I hated it. And it put me off Dead or Alive for life. So I'll probably never go back. It is ridiculously challenging, and I'm not even that good at beat-em-up games, so it kicks my ass. The easiest game I've ever played... let's have a think. Well, to complete, it's Avatar, that stupid cartoon game where you can get 1000 G on the very first fight, because that game is pathetic. I didn't even have to play after that. I turned it off and sent it back, but I didn't beat it, and it was easy to beat. Goodness me, an easy game. Well, I will say Rage is one of the easiest, hardest difficulties I've come across in a while. That was extremely simple. I was surprised at how simple it was, actually. It kind of sucked, because I do like me some challenging games. Off the top of my head, though, I can't really think. I'll have to go with Rage, because I literally cannot put any words to it. If I had to think about it, I could probably get a better answer, but the whole point of this is the spirit of it, so yeah. Dead or Alive 4 hardest, and Rage probably one of the easiest. So the next question is, how do you feel about the slip into their shoes silent protagonist in games versus having a really vocal protagonist? Another great question as well. This is interesting, because this all depends on how the story is going to be told. This all depends on the strength of the narrative, the way they've decided to tell the aforementioned story, and how they're going to have you interacting with your world. I'm a writer myself. I'm fascinated by stories. I'm fascinated by the nuance of how stories are told, by the narrative, by a lot of things. The reason why my vocabulary is as wide as it is, or as extensive, is because of my passion for words. So this to me is an interesting subject because I analyse it heavily, almost subconsciously, because it's just how I function. And if you're going to be a silent protagonist, your entire story is told through exterior stimuli. It's told through the people you converse with. It's told with whatever you are told on the game via, radios or televisions or any kind of, narrative machine that's going to be telling you exposition. It's told through what you experience and what you see. When your guy has a voice, completely different type of storytelling, because then it brings together the various facets of, if your guy does have a voice, does he have a set personality where you can't deviate from the plot? Like, you're just your standard game where he will do his own replies and you will follow his story arc and the way that the developers wanted you to experience the character. On the flip side of this, you have the Deus Ex, you have the Mass Effect, you have almost the Fallout, although Fallout is silent, you don't hear him speak, but you do pick his answers. So you have that area where you take the character where you want to take him, and they give you a variety of options of where you want to go. And me personally, I think there's room for both of them, because the best thing is variety. If you had everything the same all the time, you would live in Holland and you would be bored by things. You really would, because there is no diversity. Everything is the same, everything is the standard, and games would suffer because of this. But if you have various different ways of telling a story and constructing a narrative, you mix it up so much that it forces the medium, the art form itself, to change. And that is a very important component of anything creative, because if everything stayed the same, it would suck dick. It would be awful. So the silent stuff is good if it's done correctly, and if you have enough of a universe and enough of, a cast of characters coming in and giving you the information you would normally learn through speaking and dialogue and everything, it can be well done. It can also be bad as balls. It can really suck. And a good example of this, if anybody's ever seen it, is Shadow Complex. Not Shadow Complex, sorry, what am I fucking thinking? Standalone Complex, the Ghost in the Shell anime. And there might be a bunch of you thinking, why are you talking about anime? Well, shut the fuck up and listen. The anime itself is okay. It's not great. I'm not the biggest fan. I did like the movie Ghost in the Shell because it was fantastic at the time. It makes absolutely no sense to me because it's far too metaphysical and ridiculously crazy, but that's Japanese stuff for you. Storytelling in the anime, though, in the animated series, should I say, because anime stands for a lot of things these days, is horrific. And what it'll do is, instead of having a massively formulated story, it'll just do info dumps every so often and explain something in a really convoluted manner. And it can be through dialogue. So the main character will say something along the lines of, so what exactly happened just then? Or, so what have we got to do? And the other guy will respond by saying so much information in such a quick amount of time that you're like, what? What's just happened? What the fuck? You just told me everything about this episode in 30 seconds. And it literally goes like, oh, you've just got to go to the docks now and go and kill this dude who was once an ex-banker and had $7 million and killed a hooker and his child was called Destiny, and she had 3 friends, and her 3 friends used to ride the bus, and then they came back and they caught a jet, and then she set on fire, and he tells you everything in this one conversation instead of learning it through a progression. And it seems so forced and it's bad storytelling. And bringing it back to the question at hand, if you can do it correctly, silent protagonist is fine. Having a vocal protagonist is literally more about the RPG aspects of the game, and that suits them games immensely because it enables you to have a lot of fun with it. I'm looking forward to the times where Kinect evolves into something more than just something that sits on your TV and does fuck all, and actually, serves a purpose aside from robbing dumb and media, people that aren't used to media and advertising and marketing schemes to actually get something worth their fucking money instead of getting ripped off. But when Kinect does become something, it would be nice if you could reply through your Kinect and that would be your answer in a game. That is obviously the future of these kind of games, and that would be amazing because you could have a lot of fun with it. But that would technically be so difficult to do, it's not even worth mentioning. But I think they're both very valid. There's not one I prefer because they each tailor to different styles, but awesome question, dude. Thank you very much.